Hello and welcome to episode 7 of Unmasking Leaders. Today we are really excited to be joined by Gina Camfield, who is the Head of ESG at Aramark UK. Gina's journey is unique with a rich background in both hospitality and football, and we're really excited to explore how both of these experiences have shaped her leadership style and her current work in ESG. How are you, firstly?
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. It's great to be here and great to get the opportunity to chat to you and hopefully have an interesting discussion.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, it's much easier for us too because we just get to ask you the questions, so we can appreciate that definitely. I think really one thing I want to start at is how you got into hospitality. You know, did you always want to be in the hospitality industry, or did you kind of fall into it like a lot of people tend to?
I'd say I probably took that fall as well, to be honest with you. My first experience of hospitality actually started back at university, when I was studying for my degrees, and I fell into it as a way to earn a bit of money whilst being at university and to pay my way, and starting in mainly working on bars. And I absolutely just loved the pressure, the exhilaration that came with being in that environment. Doing my studies then took me away from the hospitality industry. So my background is in sport and exercise science and nutrition. But when I went into that, I always felt like there was something missing from my life. And for me, I've always believed that the best industries are those that bring people together, that create experiences that you can share with the people that you're working with, but also those industries where you can have a positive impact on so many people. And when I reflected back on it, the hospitality industry does all of those things, and it does it on such a huge scale. And
Yeah, it's very true, actually. I've not thought about it like that. Yeah.
yeah, and it's so unique in the way that it touches so many people's lives in so many different ways. So for example, at Aramark, in the UK alone, we serve over 250,000 meals a day, which is just incredible. And it's not just about creating great food and experiences with those. We've actually got so much power to shape how people interact with the world around them. And in my previous role in health insurance, where I was mainly focused on things that happened behind the scenes, I wanted to be much more closer to the action and to see and feel the instant impact of the work that I'm doing. And I saw the hospitality industry as a huge opportunity to do that.
How did you get into ESG in particular?
Yeah, I mean, again, it was probably actually another fall that I took, similar to coming into the hospitality industry, but there was more of a motivation behind it. My motivation for going into ESG came from really seeing that sense of urgency around the social and environmental issues that we're facing, and the fact that we need to do something. And to me, businesses, particularly business of a size of Aramark, have to play a proactive role in that. In my previous role in health insurance, I sometimes felt like we were reacting to people's problems rather than getting ahead of them. Whereas with ESG, there's an opportunity not only to respond to those challenges. So yes, we still have to be reactive, of course, because we can't always predict what's going to happen, but there's also a much bigger need to anticipate the challenges that you're going to face, and there's the opportunity to create a future that's better than the one that we have at the present, which I think is just very exciting. And yeah, something that I really wanted to be a part of.
And are there any, what would you say, in your opinion, are the biggest hurdles you foresee in terms of the ESG piece?
The big question.
I know, yeah, sorry. Just going to start with the big questions, clearly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wish I had a crystal ball to look into and know exactly what they were going to be, because I'd be a very rich person if that was the case. But for me, one of the biggest challenges I think that we will see in ESG for the wider hospitality industry is going to be moving from sort of those surface level initiatives to making sort of more deeper systemic change in our operations. So it's no longer enough to recycle or switch to LED bulbs and call it a day. Particularly in hospitality, we're entering a phase where our customers, investors, regulators, they're all looking for businesses to take accountability on their actions and also report on their progress as well through things like carbon footprinting, ethical sourcing, minimizing our waste. So for me as an industry, we need to really look at addressing these challenges and ask ourselves, are we actually being transformational, or are we just tweaking at the edges? Think about the major challenges that are coming down the road. I'd say a good example of this in hospitality is our supply chain. The hospitality industry relies heavily on a large number of suppliers, which makes tracking and sort of ensuring that there's ethical processes and practices in place a really complex task for us, but also the suppliers themselves. And whilst this is a big future challenge, we're actually already up against this challenge because our customers really want to know where their products are coming from and to make sure that they can trust that every link in that supply chain is responsible and sustainable. And that's really hard to do. For us at Aramark, we're trying to find suppliers who share our commitment to our ESG values. And then we're really trying to work as closely as we can with them to uphold their standards as well, so that we can then translate that to our customers. And it's a long journey, and it's going to be a hard one, but I do think that with the right focuses in place from the start and also the right people driving these sort of campaigns and initiatives, we're going to actually create an effect in hospitality across all of our businesses that is actually going to span beyond hospitality, because I do think that hospitality is sort of at the forefront of innovation and driving change in this area.
And it almost, I mean, being such a part of Aramark, which is such a global company, I guess potentially other companies will look to see what you guys are probably doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think being a global leader in the industry comes with its opportunities, but also its challenges as well. We're in such a privileged position that we can drive change and influence people and also support people to be better. But at the same time, there's a lot of expectation on you to do that. So meeting those expectations can be challenging, but I do believe it's one that we relish, and that we're taking into our hands to sort of share that best practice and hopefully encourage others to do the same as well.
Definitely. So, and while we're on like the topic of Aramark and leadership, as someone who's now in a senior role, how do you approach mentoring emerging leaders?
Yeah, so first of all, I think mentorship's great for everyone involved, whether you're mentoring or being mentored. I think it's one of the most direct ways that we can influence the future. And I think that's a key part of roles like mine. And it's about going beyond the technical skills that people will learn elsewhere, and about how we really prepare people to navigate complex challenges, because that for me is something that's much harder to learn and also to teach. But I think that everyone has their own strengths, and it's about harnessing those. Quite often we can, when we want to be mentored, we want to focus on our weaknesses. But for me, yes, we can look at those weaknesses, but how do we harness those strengths that you've already got to build yourself as a leader? And I think the things that I typically focus on personally are things like resilience, adaptivity, and also empathy as well, because those are sort of important qualities I've seen in successful leaders that I've worked with. And empathy, I think, is a really important one for me, particularly in the hospitality industry. We work in a world that's increasingly polarized and fast moving. And in order to succeed, you really need to understand and respect such a wide range of perspectives, be it from your colleagues, your customers, or your clients. So for me, building empathy is a really key one that I like to work on.
And it's such a people-focused industry and world, so you need to truly be able to support them and encourage them to do their own thing. So definitely.
Absolutely.
Um, Before joining Aramark, you had an impressive journey in semi-professional football, which is amazing. Could you share a bit about what that experience was like? What initially drew you to the sport?
Yeah, so that's going back to the very early days. When I was just 6 years old, I found the sport, and it wasn't an easy door in, actually. Back then, girls playing football wasn't welcomed everywhere, which might be hard to believe now with the success that we've seen recently with women's football, which for someone like myself has just been fantastic to see. And in terms of what drew me to the sport, though, I think at the age of 6, it's quite hard to think beyond the fun that came with it in the school playground with your friends, and also the role models that you see on television as well. At the age of 6, you're just thinking, I want to be like them. But as I got older, I really started to appreciate that actually football was a natural choice for me. It combined that physical challenge. I was always active as a child, with being part of a team. And I really particularly enjoyed that, the discipline, the shared goal. It's really exhilarating to me, and being part of a team and sharing that culture and being on the same journey is what I particularly liked about football. And it taught me so much along the way. You become more than just teammates, you become like family when you consider how much time you end up spending with those people, and also the emotions that you go through as well. You win as a team, you lose as a team. And it really taught me to value every person's contribution on their team, whether that was on the playing field or whether that was the backroom staff that were supporting you to be able to be successful as well, or whether that was your family supporting you in that journey, or the supporters that turned out to cheer you on every week. And for me, there was no better feeling than being able to celebrate the success that comes from sort of the people that you spend so much time with, and that you've grown so close to and worked so hard together to achieve those goals.
Definitely. And when you think about, probably looking back, there's probably some times where you had setbacks as a team and you go through it together, and I'm sure that those moments have actually been really probably helpful in your career now, would you say?
Absolutely. In sport, yourself, Izzy, as an athlete, setbacks are inevitable. You just cannot avoid them. And I think it takes a lot of resilience and accountability in those circumstances in order to overcome them. To me, I think accountability is one of the key things, actually, sort of owning up to your mistakes, learning from them, rather than trying to hide from them, because that's what's going to allow you to push forward and actually improve. And for me, that's one that's really easily transferable to the workplace. If something doesn't go as planned, or perhaps you have to make a tough decision, it's about reminding yourself, reminding your team, that we're here to learn and evolve together, and that we don't want to avoid failure, because actually some of the best progress comes from learning from your failure. And as long as we can be resilient as individuals, resilient as teams, hold ourselves accountable for our mistakes so that we can learn from them, then we're going to get those victories, no matter how many setbacks it takes along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Would you say there was a time that was maybe a darkest moment? I mean, we have often asked this question throughout our series, so I have to ask you if there was ever one time that you really kind of struggled and had to push through.
Yeah, for me, and probably similar to other people that you've interviewed on this series as well, the toughest challenge I faced was actually off the back of an injury. So I fractured my lower leg during a game. I was very fortunate to not suffer many injuries throughout my whole career, and this injury actually came later on in my career. And it wasn't just the physical pain or the months of rehabilitation that I found the challenge. It was the mental toll was probably actually the hardest part of it. That not feeling part of a team, not being able to compete, sitting on the sidelines during those really important matches that you've put all that hard work for. It comes to the finals and you're sat there on the sideline. It's really hard, and you feel like you're missing out on everything that you've trained for. And that came at a time when I was training 3 or 4 days a week, playing a match on the weekend. So my life really revolved around football. And to suddenly lose that structure in your life and that sense of purpose that you get up for every day, from such a large part of my life, I found that really challenging.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until sort of midway into the injury that I was actually able to accept that and reflect back on it. But it did teach me a lot along the way. It taught me about perseverance and how important it is to take small steps and not just focus on the long-term goals. And something else I actually really ended up enjoying was learning how to change what my goals were and change my mindset to appreciate the things that you can do rather than the things that you couldn't do.
Yeah.
So that for me was probably the biggest challenge that I faced. But I think the challenges that come in sport aren't always the big ones and the big events like that will happen. You face challenges in sport week in, week out, particularly when it comes to something like football, and team selection. Every week thinking, will I be picked for the team? If you weren't picked for the team, what did you do wrong? When it comes to competing, knowing that your performance on that day is going to determine whether you're going to be selected the following week. The pressure of going through that is extremely demanding physically and mentally on almost a daily basis when you're in a sports environment. And learning how to deal with that is something that I think really you never complete. It can't be completed. And I think that's the same when it comes to resilience. It's a lifelong journey that isn't necessarily ever completed because our journey changes. But I do believe that a large part of the resilience that I've built has come from my time in football.
Yeah, I definitely can see that. I mean, I often think what you've probably gone through in terms of the negatives or the tough times in football, that is actually probably really helped you to feel like you can overcome anything. You end up feeling not invincible, but like I can approach any situation and I'll be okay.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more.
And you kind of take this mindset that it's not like you realize that you can't control everything, but you can control how you yourself can react to something. And I think once you truly learn that, then it definitely helps going forward, I feel like.
Yeah, definitely.
So do you think there were any particular leaders on the field who influenced you, and what qualities do you feel like resonated with you from them?
Yeah, so I'd say in leaders, I probably respected and admired those who led by example rather than words. I like leaders who are calm, focused, and for me, leadership is all about that commitment to the team as well. And I've had the honour to play with some incredibly talented players. But the leader who I looked up to the most actually wasn't one who was on the field. He was on the side of the pitch, and that was Mark Sampson, who was my manager at Bristol Academy. He went on to become the England women's manager after his role at Bristol. But the way in which he conducted himself, the lessons that he passed on to us, but also how he got the most out of every single player in that team was just truly inspiring to me.
Sometimes it's not the people you would expect to really have looked up to. It's about the impact they have on you and your whole experience as well, and believed in your abilities and all the nice things.
Yeah, and that's not an easy thing to do in the position of a football manager. You're sometimes dealing with a team of up to 30 players, all with very different characteristics and behaviours. So to be able to not only manage and support those players individually, but as a team is something I've always admired from any sports coach, really, be it from the sort of top level coaches that you'll see in the Premier League all the way through to grassroots level. I really admire people in those positions.
Yeah.
How would you say those qualities have shaped your own leadership style today?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's really important that we learn from those that we look up to in conducting ourselves. I'll always try and be consistent I think being approachable is a really key thing as well. And staying focused in your leadership style in terms of working towards that goal and taking people on that journey with you. And I hope through that sort of approach that I can lead in a way that builds trust with my team. It's not about being the loudest, it's about showing up, being present, and really trying to demonstrate integrity in every decision that you make so that you can stand by it and so that your team can stand by it as well and know that you're making the decision that's the best interest to them and the business. But I think for me, and again, this relates back to being in a football environment, I think one of a leader's main jobs is trying to create an environment where everyone can do their best work and where everyone feels valued. And I really hope that my team would say that that's the case for us.
I'm sure they would. I'm no doubt about it. And obviously, we've spoken about the tougher times in your football career. Would you say there's been any pivotal moments in your business career that tested you in ways you probably wouldn't have expected?
Yeah, I think a pivotal moment in my sort of more corporate career was probably the transition into my ESG role at Aramark. I quickly realised that ESG goes much further beyond a role. It's actually about a mindset and a responsibility that you need to take a lot of people on. And there's a huge level of expectation and a sense that as a leader in ESG, your actions aren't just about business results. It's about setting a standard for how responsible, ethical, how impactful a company can be. And the impact you can have on a company's brand in this role is absolutely huge. And yeah, it's a big task, which was quite overwhelming when I was first faced with the challenge. But in terms of navigating that challenge, personally for me, it was about building relationships with as many people in the business as possible so that they could support me on that journey. And like I mentioned earlier, ESG touches lots of different departments and people. And this really helped bring us together as a team to demonstrate that ESG isn't just one person's problem or job. It's not just Gina working on this. And to drive meaningful change in a business like Aramark, we need buy-in from everyone. But I will say that I was incredibly lucky that Aramark have already sort of laid this path. The commitment all the way from our president throughout the whole business and other senior leaders is already there, and it's a genuine passion throughout our business. But yeah, certainly was a challenging journey to start with, but it's one that I'm really enjoying.
And obviously discipline, we've spoken about it quite a few times, but it plays such a big role in obviously all aspects of your career so far. Can you share an example of how discipline was crucial in your football career and how it continues to probably influence obviously your day-to-day work life with Aramark?
Yeah, I mean, in football, every training session counts. You're there to do one job. And what football taught me is that success isn't about one single standout performance. You can have a bad training session. It's about how you turn up and show and excel yourself day in, day out. And that goes both on and off the pitch in terms of giving your best when it comes to football. And you can definitely bring that same discipline into the corporate world. And I do so when working at Aramark. It's really important that you understand and recognise that those big results only come from consistency and showing dedication and effort over a longer period of time.
Definitely. Yeah, I think what you said really resonates probably for a lot of people, whether it goes through other jobs that they've had and the things that you take on from that. But I think sport, the link from sport to business, I think sometimes we talk about it a lot anyway. There's always so many lessons that can be like taken across. So yeah. it's a big topic point, I think, at the minute, and I think leadership has been as well. Like, hearing your insights into leadership has been really interesting, because would you say that leadership styles have been changing in the workplace?
Yeah, I would say I do believe that focuses are changing, and that whole the people element as well, and how we embrace our people, how we get the most out of people. It's great to see that at the forefront. We're not just driven by the financials. Of course, the financials are really important, but the understanding that in order to drive those financials, there's so much more behind it, and we need the team, we need the right people, we need to share the same values in order to get there. So I think leadership has come a long way. Yes, it's changed a lot, but also the support that is there through good leaders, I would say, is much more apparent now.
For young athletes or emerging leaders who are also facing big transitions, what advice would you give? How do you think they can use their past experiences to find successes in new fields?
Yeah, I think there's a lot that you can do. I think my main piece of advice would be to recognize the skills that you've developed through your sport and take time to reflect on that, and not overlook the power that they can have when transitioning into the corporate world, because there are a lot of similarities. Resilience, teamwork, discipline, accountability, all those things that we've mentioned today that come in sport are universally valuable, no matter what industry you transition into. It doesn't necessarily have to be the hospitality industry. They're going to be so valuable elsewhere as well. And also, I think for me, that transition isn't about leaving behind a past identity to never be seen again. Don't forget where you've come from. You're not becoming a different person. It's more about how we can bring those strengths that you had in your previous role into a new space. And adaptation is really important, of course. It won't happen naturally overnight for us, that we'll go from competing in a sporting environment to competing in a corporate world. But for me, it's just really important not to forget those core skills that made you strong and brought success elsewhere in the first place.
I think it's safe to say, Katie, we've actually asked you quite a number of questions we've actually managed to cram in there somehow. So thank you so much for...
Yes, thank you so much, Gina. It's been great to talk to you.
Yeah, it's been nice to, grill you in a sense, in a nice way, I hope. But yeah, it's been really lovely to hear all your insights. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
I like the food service pun there with the grill, but no, thank you.
I
Thank you
didn't
so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.